Hugh Freeze is the type of head coach that Auburn has not had in a long time.
Freezing temperatures are likely for several hours inland and a few hours closer to the coast.
Yahtzee.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on in to Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I am not your host, Zach Blackerby. Zach is back tomorrow. He is out on paternity leave right now. Congratulations to the Blackerby family on the birth of their second child. I am Lindsay Crosby, Auburn baseball writer for AuburnDaily.com, also host of Locked On MLB Prospects, joined by message board legend Charlie 5 for a as regularly scheduled Charlie Tuesday. And the reason I wanted you here is because we had a practice. And whenever we have a practice open to the media, we have great notes. We have great observations. And you pointed me to a quote that I think perfectly kind of encapsulates what Hugh Freeze is about at Auburn and why he is so different from the last couple coaches that we've had and how we haven't had somebody in, I would say, at least a decade that has been this focused on accumulating as much talent as possible. And he's delegating the coaching to his assistant so that he can focus on recruiting. Can you read us that? Tell us who the quote was from and read us that quote, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we were having our draft today, like guys, the visitor list over the weekend was awesome. Monday may have been even better. Which today's Tuesday, yesterday's visitor list may have been even better. I may have had two different draft picks. And one of them would have been Sterling Dixon from Mobile. He's a big time pass rusher, defensive end type player. And
committed to Alabama.
Yes, he's committed to Alabama. He loves Auburn though. Like I really think if Hugh Freeze was here before, like prior, and we may still flip him. If Hugh Freeze was here prior, he'd be committed to Auburn. So watch this name, watch this recruitment because Hugh wants him. And let me tell you how you know Hugh wants him because you hear things like this from Sterling Dixon, okay, talking about how Hugh Freeze is making him feel like a priority. This is his quote from AuburnLive.com. Man, he's talking to me every other day, pretty much every day. He talks to me more than any other head coach. I love him, number one. It's a big deal. Not a lot of head coaches really try to contact or stay in touch with I butchered that. Not a lot of head coaches really try to contact or stay in touch and see what you have going on. I love him. Number two, said I love him twice in that quote. Just constant staying on top of guys, and that's what you're starting to hear a theme of players that say this dude won't leave me alone. Like he calls me we talk every day. Our relationship's awesome. So refreshing. Sterling Dixon, watch him. Big time player.
Yeah, he has said he's going to come back for the A-Day game, and then he's going to take an official visit some point in time in the fall. This is a player reminder. He is a commit to Alabama. LSU has a lot of interest. So this is one of those recruiting battles that is you are with the big boys. You are with all of the top teams in blue chip ratio that compete for the SEC West, compete for the SEC, and compete in the college football playoff. And Auburn is right there in it with them. And at practice today, multiple people have talked about this. There's a piece out from our boss, Zach Blackerby, out there on Auburn Daily, talking about Hugh Freeze was at practice. Hugh Freeze was not Coach Hugh Freeze at practice. He was recruiting coordinator Hugh Freeze. He was over on the sidelines talking to the players who were visiting. He wasn't coaching practice. He was letting Ron Roberts coach the defense. He was letting Philip Montgomery coach the offense. He was talking to players. And that is something that you have not seen from Auburn. That single-minded intensity on recruiting is not a thing that you've seen in the world. The last guy didn't even want to do it.
No.
Hugh Freeze doesn't want to do anything but recruit. It's instead of being all about the ball, it's all about the Jims and Joes, not the X's and O's.
Another stud that was in here was DeMarcus Riddick. We've been talking about this kid, committed to Georgia. He's from Clanton, Alabama, which is like an hour and a half away from Auburn. If you ever seen the
Yeah.
Big Peach on the interstate, he's from right there.
It's about 2, but yeah, go ahead.
Big time player. He's here. This is his second trip since this second trip already, and he's coming back for A-Day. Like, I mean, you got to be sweating. If you're Georgia, you got to be sweating a little bit. Mm-hmm. This kid's going to be taking 3 trips to Auburn, probably the first 3 trips he's had to Auburn since maybe his whole recruitment kicked off, all within about a month and a half. So, I mean, the list of dudes that are coming, it's like Big Cat Weekend, but like a constant flow, but like every day, like a constant flow of them. It's amazing.
It is.
Those 2 would have been in my draft, by the way.
It is a perpetual Big Cat Weekend, just about every single weekend on the Plains under Hugh Freeze. And he did speak to the media. We did learn some things. He talked about some of the leaders on the team. He talked about some injuries. We do have a couple guys who are going to miss some time. Wide receiver Malcolm Johnson Jr. has a collarbone injury. He'll be out for the rest of the spring. Offensive lineman Tate Johnson is, I think it was an elbow injury. So he's going to be out. He's going to miss the rest of the spring. But somebody who Hugh Freeze was very, very impressed with. He talked about the leaders so far in spring camp. And he gave a list. And the first player that he mentioned was Tate Johnson. And he said, when we got here, this is not a direct quote, it's a paraphrase, but when we got here, we made every single position available for competition. Tate Johnson responded. He won our attention. He won our respect. He moved from center to guard when Avery Jones committed so that he could still be on the field, and he's done everything they've asked him to do. So it's something where Tate Johnson is a leader. Jason Jones has been cited as a very vocal leader in the locker room, a leader in the weight room, and is still expected to be a starter. We've got some defensive notes coming up. I talked about Elijah McAllister and then talked about the entire tight end room. And I thought this was really interesting. Yeah, it's something like, you bring in Rivaldo Fairweather.
There's like 10 of them.
Yeah, there's a ton of guys in there. It's Fairweather, Luke Deal, Tyler Fromm, Micah Riley-Ducker, Brandon Frazier, I think still exists. Like tons of guys.
It was great in Encino, man.
Yeah. He said, I think they're a strong group for us, not only as players, but as culture guys. And I think that's big. It's something where I am willing to bet that when the team votes on captains, from what I've heard from Hugh Freeze, one of these tight ends becomes a captain. That's just kind of what it feels like, the way that he talks about that room as a whole. Also had good things to say about Elijah McAllister, which I thought was really interesting.
Well, I mean, everybody has good things to say about that kid. He's just an impressive dude. He's just an impressive guy. And I think one thing that Brian Harsin wanted to do was work on culture. And just failed miserably. But Hugh went out and got guys like an Elijah McAllister, who's a guy that's the stats don't really pop off the chart, but he's a good player. But more importantly, he's just a solid dude who's going to come to work every day and be an example. And and we talked about that. Zach and I talked about it. I'm sure you guys have talked about it. That's that adding those type of, you saw it. I mean, I think you saw it with the basketball team a little bit this year, where there's a bunch of dudes, but no real guy, no real voice that could bring everybody together when things start going south. I think Elijah McAllister can be, and I think he will be, one of those type of guys with his football team, especially for that defense, along with several others. But loving that addition. I love that addition. Every article that I read that comes out about him, I love that addition even more and more and more.
And we're going to have quite a few notes about the defense, what they look like, who's been playing, as well as talking about the offense and some things that maybe aren't great. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. The NCAA tournament is heating up. Auburn fans obviously don't have to be reminded that that's going on right now. But this is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. New customers, which is probably all of us because now we don't have a rooting interest anymore. New customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. So download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Safe, secure, super easy to use. You can bet on all kinds of stuff. Go find a random matchup and just you can look at all the core markets, all the basic stuff, your spread, your money line, your total. You can start putting individual player props, rebounds, assists, points, and then you can do all of the exclusive stuff. We talked about the 2x3 yesterday. Will there be 2 3-pointers scored in the first 3 minutes? If you don't have time to sit and watch an entire tournament game, that's fine. Pick a 2x3, give it 5 minutes, turn it off. You're done. You're good. You can combine all of these bets for a chance to bigger payout with the same game parlay. So don't miss your chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. So unfortunately, not every single thing that we heard from practice was a great and positive note. And a lot of some of those issues came up involving the offense. So there were some quotes out there about the two rooms that have the longest way to go. And those were the quarterback room and the wide receiver room. And I want to talk about this quarterback situation because obviously everybody's kind of watching very closely who gets a lot of the reps. Robbie Ashford kind of gets some of the number one reps for the most part, rotating them with TJ Finley. Holden Geriner's definitely behind them. How much can you really learn in spring when you're not live with your quarterbacks?
I mean, like Hugh Freeze says, it's hard to learn anything. It's hard to learn. I don't even know. I think that's what he said. He said, I don't know. I don't know what you can learn when you got a guy like Robbie who excels when, the play breaks down, but he's not live. So I feel like we're just it's pretty clear. I feel like we're bringing in another quarter. Like you just got to feel like we're bringing in a quarterback in the spring. And it's kind of a weird feeling because it's like we don't want to say it, but we know that we have to because what we have right now is just not like competitive in the SEC. It's not going to be it's not a competitive quarterback room in the SEC. And I think Hugh's saying it like as nice as he can possibly say it. I was hoping they would be a little bit further along. We got to coach better. They really want to do it. They're trying really hard. I'm just not quite sure that that's who we need. So I don't know, man. It's discouraging, but I don't know. I trust you to figure out something that will work. It's just hard in the spring when it's two-hand touch to really get a good idea of what you have. But you'd at least expect, let's at least look good against Air, and then we'll just kind of build from there.
Yeah, and hearing some of the quotes from Hugh Freeze, another way with which I've been very impressed how he's a different coach than a lot of the coaches we've had in the past is, one, being willing to admit, I don't know. Like, how much can you really learn about these guys against Air? I don't know. Like, I just admitting that he doesn't know something. It feels like that's a thing that football coaches aren't allowed to do. And he's just flat out says, I don't know. But the other thing that I picked up on, and maybe this is because I sat through too many press conferences post-game from the last guy when it was execution. But he keeps, every time he talks about a position group and he has something to say that is getting the message of they're not doing as well as we want them to do, he always singles out the coaches. He's like, I think we've got to coach it better. And he makes a point to say, we have to fix this. And he talks about not only the players and with the quarterbacks, the quote here, courtesy of Auburn Live, it's certainly not from a lack of want to. And I'm not even sure it's a lack of can do. I think we've got to coach it better. Hopefully we'll see a turn towards a better understanding of what we're trying to do. And so he's very willing to say, there's a deficiency here. It's not good enough. We have to do a better job of communicating our message because they're doing the best they can. But like you said, it really does feel like things are pointing towards you're going to have to bring a guy in after spring. And then if you do or two, and if you do that, you can't get somebody from another SEC school and have them play in the fall. So I've seen people talking about like a Brock Van Gorder or something like that from Georgia. If you get anybody from the SEC in the May portal, they cannot play in the fall. That is a conference rule. They had a chance to vote and change that, and they did not change it.
Without some kind of waiver, that's just
exactly
not in play.
Not going to happen. So if you bring in a guy with the intention of him playing in the fall, it's going to have to be from a different conference. And
correct.
Obviously, no idea who that's going to be. Way too early to kind of even know who's going to be in the portal, things like that. You can't talk to guys right now. We're not going to talk about that. But I did want to ask, the other part of that he singled out was the wide receiver room. And that's something where we're all excited about Cam Brown, right? We all there's a lot of guys in that room. What are we missing with the wide receivers? Is it just a talent level? Is it a fit in the offense? What are we not getting out of these receivers that makes him worry that's one of the two rooms with the farthest way to go?
Well, if you really, really think about it, the only positives that you hear from that room are Camden Brown. It's about Camden Brown. That's it. So it seems like there is a huge drop-off after Camden Brown. Maybe there's a bunch of dudes that are about the same, but there's just a giant, you have a superstar in Camden Brown, and then there's just a bunch of guys that could possibly be better. I hate Malcolm Johnson. I hate that he's out, because I think he's one of those guys that can get better, but you just have a bunch of dudes. Mardner, what is he? He's still, getting his feet wet here, getting to know the system. I just think there's a huge drop off. I think there's just the drop off. There's Camden Brown, who's elite. He could start at any SEC school, and then there's just a drop off after that. You got a bunch of slot guys, and then that can be good, and then you just don't have a lot of number one receivers on this team.
You're dancing around the point that I kind of want to get to, and it's how much of this is just you don't see that physical shape or profile that Hugh Freeze likes in his wide receivers. Think about some of the guys he had at Ole Miss. Think about what he's typically done as far as an outside receiver. Cam Brown, 6'3", 200. He fits that physical mold of the taller, bigger receiver. Obviously, Nick Mardner is 6'6". Man's a power forward out here playing football. Landon King is somebody we talked about a lot, 6'5", 210. He's working with the tight ends and the wide receivers. But after him, Javarius Johnson, 5'10". Jay Fair, 5'10". Tavares Dawson Jr., 5'10". Coy Moore, 6'1". Is there a possibility that some of this is not necessarily talent, it's just the literal size of the guys and the fit for what they want to do because they want that taller guy with the longer wingspan?
I think you're all over it, and you can look no further than the visits this past week. You have Perry Thompson, 6'3", 200 from Foley. On Thursday, Cam Coleman, Mini Megatron from Phoenix City, 6'3", 200 is exactly who we're talking about. He wants big physical guys on the outside, and we may have a bunch of guys that have talent, but that can't do the things that he wants to be done on the outside to be successful. They talked about I think one of the things Hugh Freeze said about Cam Brown, he made a great touchdown catch. It was a back shoulder 50-50 ball. Do we have any other wide receiver that can do that? Because
you can't throw that to Javarius Johnson.
Yeah, that seems like that's an important part of the offense for him to single that out. I don't know that we have that. I don't know that we have that currently. And you can, I think you nailed it. Just look at the wide receivers he's trying to bring in that are clearly outside guys, outside wide receivers. They're all big, impressive, physical wide receivers.
Yeah. Speaking of big and physical and impressive, this defense has flashed a lot in practice, and we're going to get to that next right here on Locked On Auburn. Lindsay Crosby, Charlie 5 here on the Tuesday edition of Locked On Auburn, voting for Zach Blackerby, who is back tomorrow from paternity leave. We've missed you, buddy. But the defense, we've seen, we all expected the defense to be good, right? We all thought the defense would be ahead of the offense. But what we're seeing is a lot of praise for a lot of individual players, a lot of newcomers to the team. And I think the guy that I've seen the most positive talk about that's an addition to the team is the nose tackle, Justin Rogers. Something where it sounds like he's been inserted into the starting lineup. And so there's not an official depth chart, but you take reps as groups, and he's running with the ones at nose tackle, kicking Jason Jones in the defensive tackle with a slimmed down Marcus Harris at defensive end. Is that the best alignment for that beef that we have in the middle?
Girth, baby. Try to run on that. Get a yard. There's no push there. Look, pass rushing disruptiveness. Sacrifice a little bit, and you may have to manufacture it, like simulate pressure, like we talked about with.
Just like you cut out for a second there. Just some of the sizes of these guys. Marcus Harris, 6'3", 294. Okay, he's your defensive end. You have Justin Rogers at the nose, 6'3", 340. You have Jason Jones, 6'6", 339. You've got three massive human beings in the middle. And then right behind them, you have a guy like a Jeffrey Emba, who is incredibly fast, right? I mean, he's for his size, he's very fast, he's very agile, he's very nimble, 6'6", 307. But it's something where he just doesn't necessarily have a ton of experience at the college level. And we're making it work without the experience. But massive beef on the first line, massive beef on the second line. Jeffrey Emba, incredibly talented. You can now float him around. Welcome back, Charlie 5. And the note that I saw is they're talking about Keldrick Falk. And Hugh Freeze says, I think he's going to be a phenomenal player. I think he's going to have to play early.
Yes.
Something where he's 6'6". He's done a lot of stuff. And it's something where we just don't have enough pass rushing talent. Can you get by with just Elijah McAllister and Keldrick Falk as your not, they're not Bucks now, they're Jacks, as your Jacks? Or does this feel like something where you're going to go out and get a third guy in the portal?
It's hard to say because I love Hugh's quote on Keldrick Falk. That's what they're supposed to look like. That gets me jacked. But I think this defense, from what I understand and what I've seen, the big thing is it's not just I don't think it's just going to be your traditional stand up, come off the edge. That's how you get your pass rush. The simulation of pressure, the coming from all different angles. Georgia, who runs a lot of simulated pressure, they blitz a ton of linebackers. Like they had like regular linebackers, I think, led in sacks. So we may not necessarily have to go get a elite pass rusher, which that may be hard to find in the late spring period. But you may see multiple different packages. And when you have beef, like we have there's a 6-man rotation of beef, just pure girth in the middle that will stalemate with anybody in open lanes for linebackers all over the place, safeties to come after the quarterback and harass them. So to me, that 2 deep across the front, the defensive front is so big at being able to free people up. Yeah, so big to be able to free our second line of defense up to make plays. That's what we've been missing. You may not have a ton of sacks from your defensive line, but you're going to have a lot of garbage stats that aren't going to show up on in the box score. But those dudes are going to be. I'm so excited if they can just stay healthy and not have injuries. That front three of Rogers, Jones, and Harris. Holy cow! Like that is a sexy front defensive line. I'm fired up about that.
And to your point of you don't have to have an elite pass rusher because you're creating pressure, you're doing things like that. There was a great note on Auburn Live's notes from the practice today. I used note too many times in there. Keontae Scott, who is probably your starting nickel, was working with the Jack linebackers in one of the drills. And it's something where Ron Roberts is teaching the pass rushing fundamentals so that you can walk your nickel down into the box as a blitzer. And so to me, this is a perfect example of you don't have to have an elite pass rusher on this team. You can just have a couple guys like Keldrick Falk, like Elijah McAllister, who are really good and really talented. And then you have a great scheme and you have the ability to create pressure out of almost nowhere. I did also like the note, and again, credit to Auburn Live, credit to Cole Pinkston for this. He talked about the jack linebackers were working on, if you watch Georgia, they do this a lot too. They call it collisioning in coverage. They're not trying to, it's not a straight press of a wide receiver, but they're trying to disrupt the routes in the slot, close to the line of scrimmage, give them the ability to disrupt the quick options for the quarterback to get rid of the ball while still maintaining integrity with watching the play, watching the ball, being able to rush if somebody leaves the pocket, things like that. And so I think it just kind of shows how this defense is going to work, right? A jack linebacker may not be coming. He may drop and interfere with the route while your nickel comes off the other side and gets the sack. And it just, I can't help but be fired up about the potential of what this defense, this Ron Roberts defense could do.
Oh, I know. I saw somebody was talking about Keontae Scott. I saw somebody that said they overheard McGriff say something to the tune of like, y'all gotta basically we gotta slow down. You gotta slow down Keontae Scott, or like he's too disruptive or something like. And he's like, man, you just can't put a leash on that kid. Like you put him anywhere on the field and he's gonna go make plays. Like basically saying we got to call the dogs off a little bit because this guy, when we do what we're doing, this guy's just too disruptive. Like I love the more and more I hear about the style of this defense, it gets me, it gets me fired up. Like I start booging. I'm not gonna lie, I start booging when I think about the defense and I hear quotes. I'm telling you, I'm starting to do it. Dadgummit, I'm starting to boog.
Booging's never a bad thing. I'm not gonna call it injury proof, but I think the biggest thing I like about the way this defense is set up is because you're not relying on a specific player to do stuff, and the way that Auburn's recruited, the way that Auburn brought in multiple backups. Like you brought in Rodgers, you also brought in Masai Neely-Kite, multiple options, that if you lose a specific player, for the most part, there is someone else who can plug into that same role and give you close to the same level of production, and the defense can adjust to make up for it. So it feels like you're not in a situation like last year where you lose Echo Leota early, and then your pass rush is down to Marcus Bragg and Derek Hall, and if somebody gets nicked up or somebody gets worn out late in the game, you suffer defensively. Was that part of some of those comebacks that we gave up last year? I want to blame the former coaching staff, but that may be part of it too. So
hey, how about this? We don't even necessarily have to have an injury for him to play. We could just rotate people now. Like
that's allowed.
That's actually allowed. You can actually take a child out and let another child play while the previous child gets a breather. Like you can actually do that. And we have the guys on the defensive line to be able to do that.
What an amazing concept. If Charlie 5, if folks want more amazing concepts like that, how can they follow you, support you, love on you, get more things like that from you?
Absolutely. Follow me on Twitter at _Charlie_5. You can find me in the Locked On Auburn Discord every single day, or auburnlive.com, the corner message board, or Monday, Wednesday, Friday on the Dad Bod Golf Pod.
I'm Lindsay Crosby. You can follow me on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. You can follow my podcast, Locked On NBA Prospects, wherever you get your podcast, and on YouTube, and all of the Auburn writing, auburndaily.com. Also, if you're a Braves fan, Zach and I just launched bravestoday.com as well. Until next time, this has been Locked On Auburn.